are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the APWA Snow and Ice During COVID webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center. Before we begin today, just a few housekeeping items. You'll see some information on your screen to help you locate the questions pod. Throughout this presentation, I ask that you please type the questions into that questions pod, and our presenters will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Everyone, please go ahead and locate that questions pod and please type a hello, hi, just to make sure you know where it's at, where it's located, and how it works. Other than that, if you are unable to find that information, if you need some assistance with that, just put your name into the chat pod, send it to me, and I can try to assist you offline. With no further ado, I want to thank you in advance for your participation, and I'll pass things off to Ms. Jackie, Brian, Cindy, and Larry.
All right, thanks, Paula. Really appreciate you setting up everything, getting the word out about this webinar. Thank you all for attending today, and thanks LTAP for hosting. I'm Brian Moore with Arcadis, and I'm currently the Central Ohio APWA Board President. Many of you sat in on our previous webinars discussing how COVID is impacting our Central Ohio communities. Since it's been a few months since we last chatted, and have an update and talk about a few new things. First, I do want to mention that one of our panelists, Dan Whited, is having some unexpected medical issues, completely unrelated to COVID, and he's going to be just fine. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today. So on our panel, we have Cindy Fitzpatrick, the Public Service Director with Grove City, Larry Lester, the Operations Director with the City of Hilliard, and Jackie Thiel, the Director of Public Service Department and City Engineer with the City of Upper Arlington. Thank you all for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start the conversation with a follow-up to our summer webinar. Quite a bit has changed these past several months. Many went from not going out at all to slowly getting back out into society. So looking back to pre-March, what are some major changes people will notice within your organization? And Cindy, let's start with you.
All right, so we are still have all of our public buildings closed, so people can only visit us by appointment, and we really try to restrict that to only absolutely if necessary. So I feel like for us that's a big change. And then we are still holding all of our public meetings and internal meetings virtually. So those are the biggest changes that we're seeing. We have return to work, so where we previously were working from home, all of our staff is now back with the proper, social distancing and masking requirements that everybody is doing. We've implemented all of that, but those will be our biggest changes.
All right, great. Larry, over in Hilliard, same question for you. What are some of the major changes people are going to notice within your organization?
Ryan, we are back to a sense of normal. Prior to the pandemic, late last year, we began installing GPS units on our city vehicles, and that effort continued early into this year. So GIS has helped us improve efficiency and enhance field mobility. That's been critical through the pandemic. Also, most recently, we did upgrade our fuel system to allow our supervisors to view the system and monitor the system through a mobile app. So that's been very helpful through the pandemic as well.
All right. And Jackie, how about over in Upper Arlington?
We're kind of doing a mixture as we all try to resume our lives as much as normal. We do have our public buildings open, but we request appointments if at all possible. Obviously, everyone is masked when you're up and walking around, or if you're riding in vehicles together. And then as far as public meetings, our council meetings are still virtual, but we are starting to hold some of those public meetings in person with social distancing. Our Board of Zoning and Planning is one of those boards that meets in person, and we just try to do as much social distancing as possible. And then still accommodating the community if there's, if people obviously have different levels of comfort, and everyone has a different circumstance. So when there's people that want to attend a meeting that don't want to do so in person, we're making accommodations so that they can attend those virtually.
All right, great. So what are some things that you're doing, you would say you're doing better now than before? And Larry, you want to start us off with that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. We are using technology much more than we have in the past. Also, through the pandemic, we've reduced and limited our number of meetings. Our meetings today are much shorter, more efficient, and more productive than what they were in the past. And most importantly, as a group within our team, we've become much better at budget management and some things that we've learned through the pandemic.
Oh, great. How about you, Cindy, down in Grove City?
Yeah, I think on that one, I would echo what Larry's saying. You know, we are more efficient and more budget conscious because we initially were anticipating a 20% budget cut. And so we all kind of locked down and are monitoring that more closely, which is really better for all of our operations. And then the technology piece, you know, we had a lot of things in place, but we weren't necessarily using them to their fullest capacity. And so we've been forced to embrace that. And I am excited that those things will be able to be used more efficiently moving forward, as well as bringing on some new technologies that weren't available prior. And we'll get into some of that later, I know, in our questioning, but that's something that we've really been able to embrace here.
Oh, great. How about you?
Well, I think I'd be missing a big one if I said we weren't all better cleaners now. You know, obviously we are much more aware of our surroundings and germs, and definitely taking disinfection to prevent, you know, to some degree it is just how we interact with each other, I think is much better and safer as far as passing germs. We too are obviously utilizing technology much more. We have a service request system that we had implemented a couple of years ago, but it allows our community to reach out to us with any needed repairs that they see or questions that they have regarding anything that they see in the community. And we've seen an increased use in that during the pandemic because it's easy. We have an app that people can download on their smartphones called the Click to Fix app. And it's an easy, no contact way for our community members to get a hold of us quickly and for us to follow up with them and track progress and any needed improvements.
All right, very good. So many of us are continuing to work from home like myself, or we're going in a limited number of days into the office. So Cindy, let's start with you. What are your what is your organization doing?
Yeah, so we are all back. We aren't working from home, but I do think that the pandemic has created some flexibility for us. And so now we're able to work from home when necessary. And so kind of touching a little bit on what Jackie just said, as far as kind of being more socially aware of your surroundings, and maybe, you know, before where you have a runny nose or you have a little cough and you would have just come to work anyways, and maybe expose some people unnecessarily just even to the common cold and flu. Now people are able to, in that scenario where they feel well enough to work, you know, we have deployed laptops and connectivity remotely, and so we are being more flexible in that and allowing people to work from home if that maybe is their case, and not necessarily take a sick day if they don't need to. And so we have the capability, but I guess we're not one of the organizations that are embracing it wholeheartedly now and forevermore going forward.
Jackie, anything else to add to what you already said?
Yeah, so, you know, we do plan to go back to a completely traditional work environment where everyone comes in the office. You know, being government entities, I think that the flexibility we have now won't be able to last forever, but I don't know, the whole world's changing right now, so you never know. There could be some increased flexibility, you know, as Cindy was talking about, with working from home on an as needed basis. We are all trying to be back in the office as much as possible. As you can see today, I'm at home. We all have different circumstances. For me, I have a kindergarten, third grader, and a sixth grader. And while the schools are trying to go back to all in person, we're still not quite there. So I am also a part-time teacher as many of you are, I'm sure. So just working with our staff, I think it has brought us closer into that we're all sharing our personal experiences a little bit more, and being understanding that every person's going to have a little bit different needs. So for our essential staff, that you have to be at work to do your job because you're on the street, we are being more flexible with sick time. So in the cases where someone needs to work with their family and say, hey, my 8-year-old or 12-year-old really needs help every Thursday with school and they're at home, we are allowing employees to use sick time on those days with more flexibility than we had before. So I think the biggest thing for us is just being more understanding that everyone has a little bit different situation, and we have to work together to make sure we're getting everything done for our community.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Larry, what over there in Hilliard?
So Brian, our team returned back to normal schedules on May 18th. We have 32 team members back at the service center. We're in full operation, and we are still maintaining the 3 separate work groups in 3 separate buildings that we discussed in the first session. And Jackie mentioned a key word, and that's flexibility. We've maintained flexibility. That's a little bit difficult in my environment because we largely work in a team setting where crews are working together on projects and services throughout the city. So that flexibility is a little more difficult than it would be in an office environment and a more mobile environment, work from home opportunity. But we have offered employees the opportunity to work through lunch if they choose and end their day a half an hour early each day, and that's done on a voluntary basis. It's usually about half. We do that on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessarily a weekly schedule, but about half of our team chooses to work a full day and take a lunch, and the other half they just work through and leave a half hour early each day.
Oh, wow, great. So something else that we discussed earlier this summer is employee morale. So are you all seeing any improvements, or what's kind of the general morale of the employees? So Jackie, would you like to start us off there?
Sure. I think that, if anything, we've come together and, like I said, learned to work better together and understanding everybody's different. Obviously, we're missing that big socialization part. So, if some people used to go out to lunch together or maybe go to a happy hour together, we're definitely missing that piece, and we're missing one of the really important things to me is celebrating successes. And I haven't found a really creative way to do that safely yet. So, this summer we didn't have any lunch cookouts. We haven't been able to have any retirement celebrations, or really, when we have new employees come, it's kind of meet everybody one-on-one, not in group settings. So while I feel like everyone's doing the best they can, we definitely are missing the fun part of work. It's just come to work and get your stuff done right now.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Cindy, how about there in Grove City with morale?
Yeah, I think that we have some wins and some losses here with morale. I feel like Jackie said, we're supporting and being more understanding and being more flexible with one another, but we're also missing the fun parts. We're missing, we used to have a monthly staff meeting where we came together and were able to communicate, some of the big picture items that are going on with the city. And so now I have to distribute those via an email, and the managers share it with their individual groups. And that's just not as fun or as engaging for our staff, I'm sure. And so, we've also had some recent new hires, and some people haven't even met them face to face yet because of the work environment that we're having. Again, the successes and celebrations are non-existent right now, but also I think that we're also facing some challenges of trying to manage the pandemic and the expectations. guidelines are changing all the time, and trying to just do what's best for our staff but be consistent. And I know we'll get into a little later about positives and exposures to COVID and how we handle that, but I think that it's a challenge for our staff too when they feel like one person traveled and has to quarantine for 14 days, and then this person may have been exposed for sure, and the quarantine rules are different. And so just trying to manage that the best we can and keep expectations the same for everyone, but at the same time understand that every single situation is a little bit different, and that circumstance was different. And so, keeping the safety of our employees at the forefront and safe, but at the same time, keep everybody working and keeping everybody productive. And so I think that's been a little bit of a challenge morale-wise also, and that weighs on people.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Larry, how about there, Hilliard?
Brian, we are seeing improvements in morale. Our team is more cohesive and unified. We've come together through the pandemic. And as I mentioned in the first section, I've really noticed an increase in leadership and communication throughout our team. The first month of the pandemic, everyone was sort of in a lull. We were staring at each other, trying to figure out how do we work through this, and what is our response to public health and safety. And we had to figure that out in the first 30 days. And as I mentioned, I think in the first question, we're back to some sense of normal. Folks are starting to laugh and joke more. That's been great. And then I still see that concern of well-being from others. Folks ask each other on a daily basis, how you doing? How's your family? And that goes a long way. So it's been a real boost for us, and it's great to be back to normal.
Oh, good to hear. So initially there was concern, I think, with the economic impact that COVID could have to the income and communities that they were receiving while people were just unemployed. So what impacts to your city budgets are you seeing? Larry, you want to start there?
Sure. I think in the first section, I mentioned a 13% number in revenue loss, and a few months went by and we hit like a 6% loss we were projecting, and that number has since gone down to about just over 3% is where we ended up. And with that, staff was able to come together, look at our operating budget, and we're in the process now with City Council. We presented the first half of our operating budget this past Tuesday, and then in 2 weeks on the 26th, we present the remainder of the operating budget, and staff did put together a balanced budget for 2021.
Okay. Cindy, how about there in Grove City?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate, like everyone else, when this all first hit and things were completely shutting down, we were kind of preparing for worst case scenario and what does a 20% budget decrease looks like. And that's, a really scary thing to have to do. You don't want to lose people. And so you're trying to look at every operational thing that you could do and every project that you can defer to try to maintain. And now, here we are several months later, and all of our budgets are recovering. We actually, in this past month, saw a 2% increase in our income tax collections overall for the year so far, and so that was something we didn't necessarily expect. And we're happy to see a industry that was hit really hard was the hotel motel taxes, and we were at one point down to only 10% of our normal collections on that, but that each month has continued to increase, and that's rebounded back up to about 70% right now. That funds a lot of our community recreation and development stuff. So the way that budget balanced out for us is that we're not able to hold our events, which kind of stinks, but at the same time, since those revenues that usually fund those community events are down, it still ends up balancing out and we're not seeing a deficit there. The one place I think that we do see a little bit of a deficit is in our programming, since our Parks and Rec department isn't able to program as many things, and the class sizes are smaller. We're not seeing the income and revenue on that side that we've seen, but we have been able to balance enough that Fortunately, we're not in a scenario where we're, laying off a ton of folks. And so overall, we're pretty healthy. We're seeing, actually an end year projected balance higher than we anticipated at the very beginning of the year, but that was through some very conscious decisions in our operation budgets and some project deferment. We also, like Hilliard, are presenting, had a finance meeting this past Tuesday presenting budgets. Our 2021 budget is due to council by November 15th, and so we are optimistic but still conservative in what we're projecting and trying to balance what our capital will look like for our 2021 budget.
Okay, great. Jackie, how about Upper Arlington?
Yeah, so when this originally hit, and I think the previous webinars that we did, Upper Arlington went to a 10% budget reduction for all departments. So we all cut 10% and operated most of the year with that 10% reduction. But like Cindy, we also are now at a 2% increase in income tax revenue. So it's a good thing that things weren't as bad as we originally thought, but we were all very conscious and careful just so that we had worst case scenario in mind. So since then, some things that were part of our 10% budget cut, we've been able to reinstate or purchase. And some of those things are getting rolled over into next year with our 2021 budget. We too are going through the budget cycle right now. Our capital improvement program is going to remain as it was planned. And I think all departments were very conscious about their asks for next year, about really doing things that they needed and not necessarily wanted. So we're holding off on maybe new creative expenditures. One thing that we in Upper Arlington had thought about was maybe piloting a smart parking solution. And we feel like right now it's not the best time to budget for something that we don't know how will be necessarily received. So like that's an example of something we're holding off on asking for till maybe 2022 or halfway through next year when we see how things are going. But so far so good, and we're hoping that things continue in this direction.
All right, great. Well, before we move on to our next topic, just a reminder that if you've got any questions, just put that in the questions box and we'll answer those, at least those that we can get to here at the end. So COVID most definitely has had impacts on our communities, whether it's an employee, coworker testing positive, just dealing with visitors in our buildings, or receiving funding assistance. So let's start with the testing. So when one of your employees is tested positive, what protocols have you taken? Jackie, can you start us off there?
Yeah, so we have a flow chart that was created with our HR and fire department, so that it's a pretty easy way to look at if we have a positive test or a suspected test, here's the next steps that we need to take to ensure the safety of all of our employees. So in our case, we have had a few employees test positive. And the first thing that we do is, obviously that person's probably already at home, but we also take a look at who they were in close contact with. So we have that defined as someone that you were within less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes at a time. And so that's kind of our contact tracing, that we look back at and see who was in close contact, and then those employees are also sent home and asked to go get testing. And then we wait for the results of those tests or to see if symptoms develop. In our case, specifically to public service, when we've had just a few people that had tested positive, their symptoms were very mild, but we went ahead and had them on paid administrative leave during that time we have a 10-day. So if you're exposed and you don't know if you're tested positive, it's a 14-day quarantine. But once you test positive, we have a 10-day waiting period until you come back to work.
Okay, very good. Cindy, how about with your organization, when somebody's tested positive, what protocols have you all taken?
Yeah, it's really similar. You know, in our first webinar, I shared with you all our incident action plan, and we had similar flow charts set up on what to do if you've had exposure. We define it the same way. And what we had to iron out once we did experience that was the return to work thing. But for us, we have had a couple positive. Fortunately, the contact tracing has been relatively easy because we were still trying to maintain single occupant vehicles as much as possible. And the folks that have tested positive in our department were in our parks maintenance, and so they were out working or mowing or doing those types of activities kind of on their own. Anyone who was around or in close proximity was sent for testing also. And then we have the same 10-day waiting period after a positive test, but we also require 72 hours symptom free as a stipulation of that 10-day. And so our folks have to use sick leave though. We don't give them paid administrative leave for that. And they, I think that, you know, at least one of ours ended up being off longer than 10 days because their symptoms were just lasting longer and maybe hit them a little harder. And we've tried to, you know, with permission, be very open with our staff. I feel like letting them know what's going on is better. It also reinforces the daily practices and simple hygiene and cleaning that we need to do when those things start to get lax. And so we've been fortunate that everybody's been, you know, open and receptive to that and supportive when we have had those cases.
Okay. Larry, how about there in Hilliard?
Yes, our HR department drafted a policy early on that was signed by our city manager. And we were fortunate in operations that Norwich Fire and Hilliard Police collectively had an agreement with a medical consultant that we were able to piggyback off of that agreement. So we've had a system of check and balances where if it goes beyond the policy or if we have questions, we can call this medical provider to get direction or this consultant. It's been very helpful. And we had 2 positive tests early on in the pandemic, and both employees recovered and have returned to work. They're back to full strength, and their quarantine period worked out at the beginning of their 2-week schedule rotation when we went on administrative leave. So those employees never got in a situation where they had to use a separate leave bank that we established for COVID or use their sick leave. So things worked in everyone's favor.
Oh, good. So with all of the testing, I mean, lots and lots of more testing is happening right now. Are any of you doing antibody testing? Jackie?
Nope, I donated blood, so I had an antibody test, but
Okay.
nothing proactively for us.
Nothing there. Cindy, there in Grove City?
We're in the same boat. We have not provided any antibody testing.
Okay. How about you, Larry?
We partnered with Hilliard Police and Norwich Fire and offered antibody testing back mid-June at the Franklin County Fairgrounds for Norwich and city employees. With that test, that was a simple finger test. Then there was a swab that happened if you tested positive for the antibody. And staff, we did have some staff members that tested positive on the antibody but had no positive test for active COVID, but they did have a up to 2-day stand down period for that swab test to come back to confirm that they were negative for active COVID. So that was a very good process. It was done by the same consultant used by the city of Dublin.
Oh, okay. Well, since you're all with public agencies, I'm certain you're seeing more and more visitors as time goes on. So how is your organization handling visitors that come to your office? So Larry, how about you?
Brian, we continue to limit visitors to all city buildings, and we are encouraging any resident or consultant or contractors that we do business with to utilize our online resources. We do offer a disposable mask and hand sanitizer in multiple locations at all city buildings, and all of our buildings are marked to encourage social distancing.
Okay. How about you, Cindy?
Yeah, we're implementing the same things. The only other thing we also have is we have thermal scanners at all of our entry points. So people are required to get their temperature. They just step up to it. It does like a facial recognition and gives you a green light if your temperature is within the normal range. And then offering masks and sanitizer everywhere is what we're doing. But again, our buildings are locked to the public, and so we require them to have an appointment to come in. And if we do have an appointment, those are the procedures we're doing.
Okay. And Jackie?
Yeah, we're similar to Hilliard, where we're limiting visitors as much as possible, trying to do everything by appointment only or online through our website. But if people do come in, we do have masks available, hand sanitizer, but we are not tracking temperatures, and we don't have thermal scanners either. So that's a pretty cool thing that Grove City has.
Yeah. So the CARES Act, we've heard a lot about that, and it's available to communities. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how you've been able to take advantage of this type of funding. So Cindy, how is Grove City able to use this?
Yeah, I feel like our community has been pretty proactive with using the CARES Act funding and has gotten creative as well. So the first thing we did was embrace the technology purchases. And so, getting more laptops in our fleet, but also in our building division, they did a complete overhaul and upgrade to their software needs, and now are able to do all of their permitting online, which previously they weren't able to do. Additionally, we have purchased more outdoor seating to utilize in our town center area, so that the statistics are showing that for dining purposes, you have somewhere between 20 and 40% less chance if you're eating outdoors versus indoors. So we purchased some additional outdoor seating and put it in our town center in the public right of way for people to be able to utilize. We also formed a couple of grant programs and we partnered with Southwestern City Schools and purchased additional Chromebooks for students to utilize during this for the blended learning that our school district is still implementing. And then we've also partnered a grant program with our Chamber of Commerce for local businesses to use some of the CARES Act funding and try to keep some of our small businesses and local businesses afloat during this time.
Yeah, wow, that's super awesome. Larry, how about there in Hilliard?
Our use of CARES Act funding has primarily been focused in three major areas: small business support, technology upgrades, and HVAC system upgrades to improve efficiency and treat airborne pathogens. We have 40 rooftop units that we have inventoried, and most of those units are 15 plus years in age. So we're starting to upgrade those most critical units first and do those replacements to improve our work environments.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're about ready to head into our last section of questions. I see a few questions are coming in. Continue sending us those questions and we'll answer those here in just a little bit. So I'm sure many of you are watching the weather and see that, especially this afternoon, it looks like it's going to turn very quickly. And I know fall is my favorite time of the year, but I also know what follows fall. So with construction season coming to an end, what was different about how you operated, especially with the inspections during construction? Jackie, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, with construction and inspection, luckily we have the advantage that everything's outside. So we had our inspectors, whenever they were interacting with residents, they were required to wear masks. And then when interacting with the contractors, as long as they were socially distancing outside, you did not see masks on them or the contractors as they worked, only in the instances where they had to get in an enclosed space together. So not a huge impact on our capital improvement projects, construction inspection. I do know for like building inspections, the interior inspections, our city tried something new for us, and they did some virtual inspections that they found to be really successful. And I think want to continue doing that, especially for people that are at higher risk that, you know, might be remodeling their kitchen or something inside their home that require a building inspection, but they don't necessarily want outsider people in their home. And just for efficiency, you know, not everything on the inside of a building is going to be as easily inspected virtually, but some of these easier applications, it's something that they're going to look at continuing doing to improve the amount of inspections they can do each day.
Wow, great. Cindy, how about there in Grove City?
Yeah, we're very similar on the capital improvement project side. We didn't really see any changes. We actually had probably one of our biggest capital project years to date, and have accomplished a lot this past summer, and operations still continued. So again, with being outside and being able to stay away from folks, they could continue normal operations. Our building division did embrace a little bit of the virtual inspections, but still feel strongly that getting eyes on it inside the house is the best way to see those. And so kind of evaluating circumstances, and if a resident maybe feels strongly about it, they're going to be flexible and do that, you know, because we'd still rather have some inspection than them not pull permits and have no inspection. But the vast majority of our inspections have still been in person.
Okay. And Larry, how about there in Hilliard?
Our inspectors have continued to stay busy through the pandemic. They are wearing masks and social distancing. I did talk to several of our inspectors recently, and they feel like they've leaned on technology more through this construction season than in the past. Otherwise, it's really been business as usual for our building and construction inspectors. We are not set up currently for virtual inspections, but it's something we might consider in the future.
Okay, very good. So leaf season, I know it's starting in many communities, and snow season is going to be here very, very soon. So what do you think things will look like this season compared to the past? So Larry, your thoughts?
Sure. Our leaf collection program begins next Monday. 3 years ago, we automated all of our leaf vacs. So our leaf vacs now have radio controls as well as hydraulic arms. This change allowed us to reduce our crew size from 4 to 2. Up until this point, we have operated with 1 technician per vehicle. However, with leaf season, we'll go back to 2 technicians per vehicle, and there'll be some distancing there. We have the opportunity to operate the leaf vac from the truck. There is also a seat mounted on the leaf vac, and then most of our technicians prefer to walk behind the leaf vac on the sidewalk, so that'll create some distancing as well.
Okay, great. Jackie, how about Upper Arlington?
Yeah, leaf collection also begins for us on Monday, and we operate in 3 person crews. So something that we're doing differently this year is doing our hardest to keep people together. We realize that they're going to have a little bit more exposure than they have been operating in. But keeping those 3 people together so that if somebody would come down with something, that we're keeping it limited to those 3 people. So we are keeping, you know, in the morning and the evening, gathering sites, trying to keep those 3 people only together as much as possible. We're not having big group meetings in the mornings or at the end of the days. And then we have 2 people kind of on a reserve list that if someone is off, they're able to fill in on that crew, and doing our best to not intermingle the crews as much as possible. You know, we do have some distancing as well for the person that's currently picking up the leaves and operating the machine versus the driver, and then there's somebody that follows behind in the dump that takes the leaves to and from the sites to go dump. So there is some distancing there, but we realize that if we do get an outbreak, that will probably take out an entire crew, and we only have 6, so we're trying to be as careful as we can. Really, I think Cindy earlier in this webinar mentioned that as time goes on, it's hard not to get lax in our disinfection. So reinstating that it's really important that we're disinfecting, washing our hands, just kind of going back to the basics with that.
Okay. Cindy, out there in Grove City.
Yeah, I don't really anticipate huge changes with leaf collection or snow. I think that the way we've always operated kind of already embraces the social distancing protocols that are 2 rakers that are just making sure that they get to where they need to be. And so our rakers have always kind of walked, and they try to tend, ahead of the truck. And so they're outside and can be socially distant. I don't think that they need to be within that 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes ever during that operation. So I don't really anticipate that changing much. We did purchase some headsets so that communication could be a little easier, and they could maintain distancing better as far as communication, because those machines are typically pretty loud, and so to get somebody to hear you, you maybe had to get a little closer, and so we're hoping that those headsets will help with that piece. On snow and ice, our normal operating procedures has always been that our crew gets split into 2 shifts, and then it's 1 person in a dump or pickup as we're doing plowing or salting. So I don't anticipate any needed changes for that operation, and I'm excited to say that COVID shouldn't impact the level of service we're going to be able to provide our community this winter.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to head into our last question for the panelists before we get to all your questions. So are you hearing any concerns from staff heading into the fall and winter season? So Cindy, any concerns there from your staff?
No, I'm really not. I think that we're all kind of getting used to rolling with the punches and being adaptable. And if and when things come up, coming up with the best plan that we can and embracing it. So I'm not really hearing major concerns at this point.
Okay, great. How about you, Jackie, up Arlington?
No complaints over here as of now. So we get rolling into leaf season. Usually, our crews enjoy that at the beginning, and then as it gets closer to December, it starts to wear on all of us. So we'll try to stay positive throughout the season.
So Larry, anything over there in Hilliard? Any concerns?
We're not hearing any concerns from our team members. We'll continue to ramp up our efforts to disinfect vehicles, because this will be our first move back towards shared vehicles with leaf collection and snow. We've been in assigned vehicles up to this point. With some of the changes I mentioned in the first session, with our 3 work groups and divided buildings and our building assignments, that whole setup was very well received by our team members and by the union. So we'll maintain that as much as possible. It will be a challenge with leaf collection and getting back into more of a crew setting, but we'll make do. And right now we're just looking forward to 2021.
I think everybody is. All right, so we've received a few questions so far. So we'll go ahead and roll through some of those. And the first one here really ties in with what we were just talking about. And that is, how long are each of your leaf seasons? So, Larry?
So we begin next Monday through mid-December. We try our very best to have things wrapped up by 3rd week of December. Oftentimes that can carry over into the new year based on weather, largely based on weather. And equipment breakdowns can play into that as well, but it's largely driven by weather. We've learned through past experiences that on the days when we have significant rainfall, we park our vacs. It's not worth the risk, and then we'll pick it back up the next day.
Gotcha. Cindy? Wow,
Yeah,
in
you
Grove
probably
City,
saw
how
me
long?
nodding there at everything he was saying because ours is very similar. We again start Monday. We have our city divided into 4 collection areas. Every collection area gets 2 weeks of pickup. So we run through 4 weeks to hit the 4 areas, and then we come back a second time in each of the areas and hit it. So essentially it's an 8-week long season. But we always carry that with the caveat that it's weather dependent. And if snow starts flying, then that's going to take priority. And we have yard waste collection year round. And so, you know, if we get to that mid-December and start having major snowfall or the leaves just freeze and we can't collect them with a leaf vac, then folks will have to bag it and wait for their yard waste collection. But typically in most years that's not the case, and we, like Larry, end up, you know, we are scheduled through mid-December, but we end up doing that beyond to accommodate residents, with, you know, some trees just fall later, and, you know, we'll get calls that, you know, my leaves hadn't fallen yet, is there any way you can? And so we'll extend it as long as weather allows.
Okay, yeah. Jackie?
Yep, so we start Monday. Our goal is to get through the city 5 times. So 5, everyone will see us 5 rounds throughout the city. And our goal of right now is to have our final round start the week of December 7th. But like Larry and Cindy, it seems that there's always a few trees that didn't fall, or a reason that we have to go through one more time for a few different collection areas. But I think Cindy said it too, snow and ice is our priority. So if for some reason we start to get some heavy snow events, then we go to asking residents to bag the leaves and put them out for yard waste.
Okay. So we got another question here asking, did IT have concerns with working from home and possible security issues through personal routers and laptops at home? Just kind of open that up for y'all.
So for us, I'm sure they did, but it didn't stop us from implementing it. I just don't know the details of what they went through.
Our IS department already had the security measures in place to allow for that. I know that I've always been able to take my laptop home and securely work from home and access our network. And so I think that they had to expand that for more users, but I don't think that they had concerns because they already had that established.
Brian, our security was in place as well. And I will say our IT team did a great job early on. They pulled things together like in the first week and were able to deploy laptops to employees that did not previously have them. And it was really fun to watch their quick response.
Oh yeah, fantastic. So we got another question here asking, are all employees in all represented cities working a regular 40-hour week with rotating shifts? So open that up there.
Yeah, we're back. Everybody's working 40 and we're no longer rotating shifts. So everybody's on there back to their normal shifts here in Grove City.
Yeah, we're back to 40-hour typical work weeks. The only thing that we do different is with our public works crew, we do have them split into 2 separate areas. So half the employees report upstairs and half the employees report downstairs, just to keep some separation.
And we are back to normal work schedules aside from the half-hour lunch that we discussed earlier.
Okay, very good. So we got another question asking, do you have a backup plan for CDL required drivers if you get an outbreak during snow and ice control? Do you consider yourselves as essential employees?
Yeah, I mean, we are considered essential employees. What we do is really important to our residents' daily lives. For us, if we had an outbreak, we would rely on much of our park staff, and then we also have some fleet staff and electrical staff that are CDL trained. They don't go through as extensive snow and ice training, but they do have a brief training, kind of an accelerated training on it each year. So they are our backup plan if we have an outbreak, or if, this is the year that we get a blizzard. Wouldn't it be the year in 2020?
I would, yeah, I'd kind of echo what Jackie says, except that, we already utilize our fleet maintenance and our park maintenance staff for our snow operation. We're pretty lean here, so it's all hands on deck when we're in snow season for us. So as far as a, backup plan, I can't say, we only have so many CDL drivers. And so that's why we have to continue to stress that we do all of the protocols, and we do the disinfection, and we do the distancing and masks, because you can't just pull CDL drivers out of the air and throw them in a truck. We would have some flexibility in changing routes. We have really well established routes, and we have established handbooks in our trucks that if somebody had to go to a route they're not used to, we'd have some flexibility in that. Additionally, every year we have contractors with open purchase orders on the books that if we were to get that really big snow event, we bring them in, and that's already kind of an established relationship we have with 3 separate contractors. So in the event of an outbreak, we could utilize those emergency contracts.
Brian, we have staff outside of operations who are also trained in snow removal, and they are identified in our snow and ice control plan. We also have additional equipment throughout the city that we have the ability to put plows on that could be utilized. All of our crew leaders, supervisors, and including myself are trained in snow removal, and we all hold Class A CDLs. So in the event we need to step in to provide assistance, we're prepared to do so.
You're not putting me in a truck.
You also don't want me to drive a truck.
All right, so the last question I see so far, so if you got any more, we still have some time left, but the last question I'm seeing is, do all of your agencies follow the Ohio Travel Advisory requiring the employee to quarantine if they have been to a state with greater than 15%?
We do, yes.
Yes.
Not anymore. We did. That's a good question. We did have that policy in place, and then a few weeks ago, our city manager made a change to that if you come back from a state with a high positivity rate that's on the Ohio Travel Advisory, that you come back to work with extra precautions and extra social distancing. If you have a job where you can work from home and you choose to, they will allow it, but you are no longer required to quarantine.
Okay.
And I think that was due to some police and fire grievances we were receiving.
Okay.
And just around that topic, I think is where some of our staff felt some frustration that people who were being quarantined for going to a state where they may have practiced the best of precautions and weren't exposed were being required to quarantine using their own sick leave for 14 days. Yet then you have somebody who has a positive COVID test, and as long as they're symptom-free 10 days later, they could come back. And so I certainly understand that. I certainly also understand why both of the policies are in place. And so, in trying to manage a department and manage everyone's safety and expectations, that is one point that has been maybe a little not as well received.
Okay. Well, with that is all the questions that we've gotten. So thank you, panelists, Jackie, Cindy, Larry. Thank you so much for participating and sharing what's going on within your communities. Thank you all to all the attendees for participating in this, and thanks for LTAP for hosting. And with that, I hope everybody has a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
moderating, Brian.
Sure thing. Bye.